Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Hope you're having a great day. I'm greatly honored to be here today at the ArabNet Digital Summit. This is not the first time, I hope not the last time they invite me to be around. ArabNet is the leading digital forum on everything tech, web and mobile in the Arab world. And this is not only due to the impressive lineup of speakers and interesting topics that we have, but the great work that the ArabNet team does behind the scenes to make sure this happens. And obviously to you, the audience, who interacts with us, asks very interesting questions, and we're counting on you. Sticks around for the after party, you'll tell us later what happened yesterday, and let's see what happens in this panel. So please first give yourselves a great round of applause. Over the last 100 years, 5 major trends have dominated Silicon Valley. We started with electronic tools, which companies like HP and TI were working on. Then we moved into semiconductor with Intel and AMD leading that wave. There was an enterprise wave somewhere around the late quarter of the last century with Oracle, SAP and such companies bringing in a lot of enterprise tools. Then we moved into telecom with Cisco and Tricom and other companies making all these networks connected. And eventually, the last decade or 15 years, we've been in the consumer age. Facebook, Amazon, Google, all these companies. And although pioneering in its time, innovation in this space grew stagnant, to the extent that Y Combinator once wrote, if you don't think you're smart enough to start a startup doing something technically difficult, just write enterprise software. This is how low it got in the last few years. However, we are in the beginning of a 6th trend, the smart enterprise wave. And here I'd like to quote from John Lonsdale, the co-founder of Palantir and Edipar. John says, the smart enterprise wave will disrupt nearly every major sector of the global economy and dramatically improve productivity within those sectors, because it disrupts non-linear decision-making processes that are central to how major industries conduct business and create value. Our panel is about how companies can leverage these recent technology advances to deliver a better experience to their customers and make their future possible. Joining me today are 4 experts, each in whose own field, to share their perspectives on the evolution towards the smart enterprise and to discuss the major trends the space is currently witnessing. So, without much further ado, allow me to invite my esteemed fellow panelists on stage. So, first, and in alphabetical order, Afzal Khalfai. Afzal please join us, is the VP of IT for Dubai Ports World, DP World, where he focuses on driving change and delivering value through innovation. Afzal is instrumental in managing Turn 8, which is DP World's seed accelerator, and is always on the lookout for new ideas, products that allow his organization to perform smartly, productively, and efficiently. Anthony Butler. Anthony is CTO of IBM Cloud in Middle East and Africa, where he focuses on helping companies across the region use the cloud to transform their businesses. He has a Master's of Engineering from Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, and you can follow him on Twitter on @abutler, all right? If you want to ask any question later on. Jatin Modi. Jatin is CEO of Frog Ideas, one of India's leading independent digital marketing agencies. He's been an entrepreneur since the age of 19, 2-3 years ago probably. Has founded and sold startups in education, home automation, e-commerce, digital marketing and analytics over the last decade. He's also an active practitioner of Jiu-Jitsu, be careful, and is writing a book on revenue opportunities through digitization of the enterprise. Jatin, can you tell them about your Twitter handle, because that one is difficult for me.
So my Twitter handle is Poorn, that's P-O-O-R-N. So remember, it's not a singular O, it's O-O-R-N. Poorn, V-I-R-A-M.
What does it mean?
It means full stop in Hindi. So full stop is the end of a sentence, but it's also the beginning of a new sentence. So it means full stop in Hindi, which is, so I'm from India, and Poorn means full stop.
Last but not least, Rob Jail. Rob leads the media, entertainment and publishing vertical for Acquia, a digital platform company driving many of the largest media sites in the world, including NBC, Fox, BBC, NFL, and the Weather Channel. Prior to joining Acquia, Rob led digital platforms at NBC Universal, He's also an advocate for open source software within enterprises and sits on the board of directors of the Drupal Association, one of the largest open source projects with 30,000 developers and growing. You can follow him on Twitter on @RobJill. Please join me in giving them all a warm round of applause. Defining a little bit the smart enterprise. It's a new word that came up. In fact, it was new for me. So I did some, brief research yesterday and found some points that maybe we can talk about what you guys believe it is. And one of the first definitions I found was it integrates big data and empowers knowledge workers to solve non-linear problems. So maybe Anthony, you can give us a brief about the big data aspect of this.
So from my perspective, a smart enterprise is an enterprise that addresses what I see as being three mega trends in the industry, that are all industries, that are affecting all industries, all verticals, whether you're IT, whether you're logistics, whether you're transportation, whether you're healthcare. And the first of those is that data is increasingly becoming the world's new natural resource. If you look at how much data is produced every day, if you look at how much data is new, so 80% of the world's data volume was created in the last 2 years. You look at, for example, 80% of the data that exists in the world today is unstructured. So sitting behind the corporate firewalls in many organizations is a vast repository of untapped value, and that's data. So we see smart organizations, smart enterprises, as being those enterprises that take advantage of the opportunities that data presents. And that also extends beyond the firewall. It extends to social media data. It extends to all forms of data, video as well as text. So that's the first characteristic of a smart enterprise, taking advantage of data. The second mega trend that we see is around cloud. The cloud is enabling organizations to reinvent themselves. It's enabling new entrants into new markets. It's creating a great deal of disruption. At the same time, for the enterprise, it presents tremendous opportunities. The reason is that the barriers to entry that once existed to get access to vast amounts of computing power have now been removed. To get access to the latest technology, to the latest capabilities that previously might only have been available to a select few, has now been democratized through cloud. So cloud has a tremendous potential to transform industries and also to transform enterprises. So the smart enterprise is an enterprise that takes advantage of these opportunities that are presented. And the third, mega trend is around social and mobile and analytics. So social, mobile, and access to data are essentially changing how we understand customers and how we engage with them. So smart enterprises are also taking advantage of these mega trends as well. So in a nutshell, we see the smart enterprise as being the organization that addresses those three trends that we see in the industries today.
So data being on the cloud and the impact of social and mobile. Jatin, what do you think of this impact of the consumer, basically technologies into the enterprise, and how is it affecting their ability to make these non-linear decisions?
So what I personally believe in, that's with due respect to Anthony as well as you, Zia, is that smart enterprises, if you look at 10 years back, we didn't have a smartphone. And in 10 years, in 2007, the iPhone came out, and if you look at today, majority of traffic in China and India, which are the fastest growing internet markets in the world, is all mobile.
So what makes it smart? What makes a smartphone smart?
So I'll come to that. So what I think is that, smart enterprises is not only an IT function. It is also what I think the biggest value an enterprise can build in order to become smart and to remain smart is the value of culture. And if you're able to build a culture of being smarter, if the values that you progress in your company, the kind of people that you hire, promote, are by nature more innovative and slightly more hustling oriented, I believe that you have a higher propensity to be smart and to remain smart, because the disruption will be ferocious even further on.
So we talk about hiring later. That's a very interesting aspect. So what do you think, Rob, from your perspective?
In media, I think you see a lot of the old legacy models. Media is all about distributing content, about creating content and then getting it to your end user. And in the legacy media model, a lot of times that was creating content in a very generic way for a very large segment and then selling advertising against it. What's changed in the last couple of years, it's no longer about targeting a large segment, it's about targeting an individual. And that's where the big data in the cloud comes in, especially in the industry I work in. You're now having to distribute content directly to an end user, and you have enough information now to know everything about that end user, and ultimately that'll be more valuable in terms of advertising and selling to a large segment. The challenge around that is it's not the culture of big media. Big media doesn't operate that way. So, the systems aren't in place to capture individual data, but they're starting to happen. There's a lot of startups in that space. I think, to me, that's the transformation we work with big companies on, is how can you capture that data around your end user and then target your content. And it's already happening on its own. You see on the YouTube example, like multi-channel examples, that is incredibly personal. People have very, very specific types of content that they're trying to find, and they go seek it out and they find it, and that model's flipping. The big media needs to push content out to users that they want to get to without them having to search for it.
But this brings in, when you go targeted towards specific consumers or users, this brings in a major privacy question. And while the web is worldwide, there is still differences in how these matters are, allowed or not in different countries. How, for a global smart enterprise in the media space or in any space, how do you bridge this privacy concern?
In media it's very challenging. It's different in every country. It tends to be more restricted for example, in Europe than it is in America. It has to be anonymous. I know the irony to me about that is you can have enough anonymous data about someone to basically know who they are without identifying them as a person. So right now, the way that most companies deal with that is they keep the data anonymous in that it doesn't have a name, it's a number. But you're still, targeting.
With smart platforms like the ones IBM is putting in place, and you can make a lot of conclusions.
Yep. Yeah. So that's very much still in flux. It's definitely a challenge, especially. And then you have certain regions where the data has to be in the region. And I agree with the other point. I think one of the biggest, you have to leverage cloud. I feel like a lot of old IT models are not going to be able to scale to deal with this. The challenge with cloud is that, like our platform is built on Amazon. Amazon's only in certain regions, and you might be operating in a region where you have to have a data center in that region.
I'd like to bring in, Afzal to discussion from the enterprise actually side of things, and then, Dubai Ports World being the operator of Jebel Ali Free Zone is probably one of the hubs of everything that ships from one place to the other, at least in this side of the world. So, how do you see your evolution from an old economy company, which is one of the oldest in the world, to this new economy? How are you as CIO really affecting where DP World is going in the future?
Our business is really moving cargo or moving goods, and like Ziad said, yes, it's an age-old operation, but it has transformed significantly. Just before the panel, I was in a discussion with one of my colleagues, and he was curious as to how this business functions and what kind of technology do you really use. And I was telling him that anything that you can think of, any technology that's out there today, is actually used in the terminal. It's done more so that we can improve our efficiencies, we can improve our productivity. We move anywhere, a container could be from 50 tons to 100 tons, and we have to move those kind of heavy goods. We have to make sure that we have a safe operation, we have an efficient operation, and that we are functioning properly without any kind of hindrances. And that's really where technology comes into play. And this is how we make our enterprise smart. So we have two sides to this equation. One is the internal side, where we're trying to make all our operations smart. Again, there's a big data component that comes into play because we're getting feed from all kinds of equipment that's out there, all kinds of people that are out there on the field. And then we have to deal on the outside, which is dealing with our customers. And we have to make their life easier, because with the advent of all of this technology, they all expect us to provide services in the technology that's available.
I was listening to a speech the other day, and somebody said that a Boeing 777 has around 15,000 sensors in it and generates around 1 terabyte of data each flight. which is a huge amount of data. First, if you have any such data collection mechanisms in your operations today, if you can tell us about some idea, and then Anthony, maybe you can tell us, like when we have so much data, how do we actually figure out what to do with it?
So all the equipment that we have has a SCADA drive or has a PLC in it, which is continuously sending information with regards to the status of the equipment and what it is doing. So we have to capture all of that information. It does run into terabytes of data. Not only that, for every container that we move, we have information with regards to what we did, since we have to charge our customer for the work that we do. So each customer generates each container does about 10 to 15 moves, and every move generates about 1,000 transactions. So you can see the amount of data that gets generated through this particular process, and that's the mountain of information that we have to deal with. And then we have to sift through and make intelligent analysis out of this information so that we can benefit and we can get our customers to benefit from it.
Anthony, what does IBM bring into the space, especially something like Watson?
So if you imagine that you have all of this data collected, there's essentially three things that you can do with it using analytics. And they to some extent represent different levels of maturity from an organizational and a technology perspective. So the simplest thing you can do with all that data is descriptive. So understanding what's there, understanding what you have, and describing it in a way that you can understand and derive business value from it. The second aspect to it, or the second thing that you can do with data, is prescriptive. So we have descriptive, we have predictive. Predictive is where you make predictions about the future based upon this data that you have stored. So for example, one of the aircraft, use your example, one of the aircraft manufacturers that we work with took all the data in real time for all of those sensors and all of those engines that are in all of those planes, and is now able to predict with 97% accuracy the likelihood when there will be an in-air failure. So they're deriving predictive value from this data. And the third, which represents very much an emergent area of capability, is prescriptive. So prescriptive is not just saying this will happen in the future, but it goes far beyond that, and it tells you these are the things that you need to do in order to mitigate that risk, address that opportunity, and so on. So this is an area where we, as a company, IBM, we've invested billions of dollars in addressing the prescriptive aspect of data. And that's through a technology called, what we call Watson. And that is essentially a cognitive computing platform. So some of the real world examples, and I'll pick one industry, and that's healthcare, is we've been working with a number of healthcare providers in North America and also within the MEA region now, where we take all of the data that's collected within a hospital. So we take all of the EMR, the medical records of the patients. We take the unstructured data that's encapsulated in the notes that physicians take when a patient is visiting them. We take all of that data, we take wearable data, if they're collecting wearable data, we're taking data from the modalities, which are the healthcare devices that capture images, etc., etc. We're putting that all into a single platform called Watson. In addition to that, we're taking the body of knowledge, in the case of the hospitals we're working with at the moment, that's around oncology. So we're taking all of the research papers that have been written related to the field of oncology, and we're putting it into this cognitive computing platform. Then what we can do is we can actually do prescriptive medicine. So when a patient presents themselves to a doctor, the system is able to recommend to the doctor, to the specialist, courses of action that are highly personalized. So similar principle to what Rob talked about with personalized marketing, but applying it to medicine. So we can say for this patient, based on their particular medical history, based upon what their symptoms that they're presenting with today, based on the body of knowledge within the medical profession, we recommend that you take this medication and you do this, you do this, you do this. And then it presents that to the physician.
So actionable insights that can actually lead to directly saying do this to your patient, or in this case to your customer, or to whoever.
Exactly. So
we do something very similar in the media space, which is that a user like a travel site, for example, whatever. A user comes to that site, within 2 or 3 clicks, you know that they're looking at Caribbean vacations, right? And so you can immediately dynamically change that site so that it's relevant to what that user's looking for, which seems obvious, but it's not how the web works today. You go to a travel site and you have to click around for 10 minutes trying to figure out what you want.
I'll also say to we're seeing that customer or end user expectations are changing as well, right? They're expecting a lot more responsiveness and a lot more speed from the enterprises that they're dealing with. So we did a survey, for example, where we found that when someone engages with an enterprise via social media, if they don't receive a response within 5 minutes, they start to develop an adverse reaction or a negative perception of the company. So this kind of velocity is placing a lot of stress and a lot of demands on enterprise.
So consumer expectations built through consumer technologies are putting the pressure on the old world. We talked about logistics, we talked about healthcare, we wanted to talk about hiring, because I think that something like LinkedIn did not really disrupt the hiring industry, just added to it. And frankly speaking, we were talking, you interview a lot of people, but that's what LinkedIn tells you, who's available to interview. But how can we use technology to make better hiring decisions?
Well, so just as an example, we did a pilot for a company where we said that we go out and really hire somebody on Twitter, and it will be done completely publicly, and we judge the same skill sets, we'll judge the OQ, the EQ, and the IQ, but we'll do it completely end-to-end on Twitter. So most companies use Twitter only to post job descriptions. What this resulted in was, for a few job openings, there were more than 100,000 people applying from all over the globe, and the best of talent was coming for a job role that they thought was really interesting to them. They were getting quizzed on each and every facet of what they were good at, and because it was being done publicly, there was only so much that they could do, which was, I think Anthony, you were mentioning that 50% of the interview decisions that we end up taking are all wrong. And when this kind of thing happens on Twitter and in public, there is the intense, public scrutiny as well, which all the candidates face, and hence truth really comes out. And we saw that becoming a big deal. Wall Street Journal was writing about how recruitment is getting disrupted in a very big way, and a lot of companies across the globe are trying to.
Perhaps you can tweet that article to the audience later. It might be interesting to read.
One of our biggest challenges is in the development space is hiring. Hiring good developers is hard, which is interesting to me because the process that we go through is, you look at their code, and in a lot of ways we're an open source company, so we hire open source developers. That code's out there. It's on GitHub, right? There should be an automated way to be able to tell, very easily if somebody has the experience that is going to meet your need. But so I don't know.
Audit advanced there. Before moving to the next topic, I'm wondering if the audience has any questions on what we have heard so far. Do we have a mic somewhere? Any questions? Fadwa? No questions? Yes. We have a question from Fadwa.
Hello. Please, when you talk, for example, the free zone, when you talk about making the processes more efficiently, is there a way you use to automate the process, or how do you go about it? Do you invite people from outside, or you rely on inside technologies?
Good question. What we typically do is look at the process itself, see how the process can actually be handled well manually. Because at the end of the day, if the system is not available, we still have to service the customer. So we want to be sure that we have taken care of all the aspects of being able to serve the customer. We look at the processes, we look at the human interaction points, and which points can actually be mechanized. And that's basically where we bring the automation into picture, provided that it can be appropriately mechanized or automated, and the human angle is taken care of while we provide for that particular service.
Yeah, I think another important factor is in the development world, agile development. I think that can be applied to a lot of process, which is shorten your cycle. Don't do things quickly and then look at it, see what, and do it again, as opposed to big giant enterprise 6-month projects with no visibility. We went through a major transformation at NBC Universal a couple years ago along those lines. We were very old school, top-down sort of project management waterfall model, and we switched to agile, and it was very beneficial.
So I think this is an important point, and it's something that within my own organisation we've seen, because IBM is a 100-year-old company. Now we're reinventing ourselves to address these new opportunities and keep in step with the market. And so as part of that transformation, we adopted an agile methodology and an agile culture. So we created some wholly owned subsidiaries, that are essentially wholly owned subsidiaries of the company, one of which is IBM Cloud, but we also have analytics, healthcare, and some other organizations. And and this started in January this year, and the first thing that was told to me was you need to think and act like a startup. And so, is very different to how the organization had traditionally operated. And so we adopted an agile way of thinking, which is based on basically 3 principles. And this is something that I think that can be applied to any organization. And the first was to focus on the outcomes. So not worry about the how, but be very clear, have crystal clarity on what the outcome is of the project. The second was to listen to the market, to iterate, to learn, and then course correct. And this is something that's very, very different to how most enterprises tackle projects, where they typically aim for perfection. And so they have very long waterfall-based development times because they're aiming for something that has 0 defects that they can get out there. Whereas the method that we adopted was we optimized for speed over functional completeness. So it was more important that we got something out there quickly, we could get feedback from the market, we could adjust, we could adapt, and we could iterate. And then the third aspect to it is really speaks to the cultural aspect, and that is to encourage more self-direction. So instead of having strategy and so on mandated from the top, diffuse that through the organization and empower people organizationally, but also through making available to them the tools and the platforms and the data, etc., to innovate. So they were the three ways in which we've been addressing this.
This affects a lot the cultural aspect that you spoke about.
It goes to show a lot about the cultural aspect. And when organizations empower their workforce, it creates an immense difference for their revenues. As an example, one of the verticals that you can think of, which is probably the most old school, is sales. Typically, people have been going out, doing cold calls, trying to set up meetings, going out meeting people, and then trying to close deals. But there is smarter ways to sell, and we've been doing that for a lot of our clients, where you're able to understand your customer, because sales is one-to-one. It's never organization to organization. It's person to person. You can understand your customer. You can actively engage with them in a fruitful dialogue online, and then move the relationship offline to close deals. In one of the examples, it's a beautiful example. In one of the organizations that we did this, which is Smarter Selling, they found a 25% increase in marketing qualified leads quarter over quarter. Now, for a company which is doing close to $10 billion of sales, 25% over a quarter is an immense difference. And it changes the paradigm of how you're operating. It changes the competitive landscape. It creates immense competitive advantages for you, and your competition is forced to innovate themselves. So I believe that as culture, you're putting employees at the forefront, you're empowering them to talk, you're empowering them to take the voice of the company out there. The employees are more engaged, the customers are more engaged, and hence you're adding revenue. And you're adding, which is what you want to do.
So I want to go to Afzal because there is a very important role that we can play inside the company, but there's an even more important role that startups can play in supporting the enterprise and its move to the smart enterprise. And DP World is one of the pioneers in the region of supporting a very good accelerator program here. So maybe you can tell us more about Turn 8.
So one of the things that we have started is an accelerator called Turn 8. We bring in ideas at a very early stage and help them through so that they become viable products for businesses. We run them through a 4-month cycle, giving them all kinds of training that is required so that they become a viable product. One of the reasons why we looked at this is to look at the changing landscape, and we do not anticipate in the next 10 to 15 years business, the way it is conducted today, to be the same. And it will have a tremendous impact of technology and where technology is going and how goods actually will get moved over the next 10 to 15 years. And we would like to actually be at the forefront of that. So one of the things that we have done is an external facing accelerator called Turn 8 that will allow us to look at ideas, look at the space, look at what's happening, how people are thinking, and then hence bring that in to DP World and hence make changes internally within the company.
So, Anthony, what's it?
So when I was at ABC Universal was acquired by Comcast a couple of years ago, and we got to interact with the Comcast team. And one of the things that Comcast did that I thought was really cool and it worked exceptionally well was it was similar, but it was internal, which was they would set aside 2 or 3 sprints each quarter, so a week or 2 of development each quarter, to just let their developers work on what they thought would be good ideas. And then if something bubbled out of that, then they turned it into a product.
Internal or outside?
Internal. But then they've started to open that up.
Okay.
Right? And then also invite external. And they've had products that have come out of that process that have been very successful. And that goes back to the culture. I mean, you have to have a culture internally that allows that. Because if you have a very rigid top-down culture, we can't, that's going to delay this project, you can't do that.
2 questions on this before we get to the things. Any example that you can specifically talk about?
Yeah, so the X1 platform, Comcast's new cable box, basically.
Okay.
The search function on those boxes suck. Like in general, you're using they have a smart search that basically, if you put in G, it's contextual. So you put in G, it brings up Game of Thrones first, without typing anything else, right? Because it knows that probability-wise, and that was
developed internally or externally. So we have hope that Etisalat or Google can work with one of the local operators and work with a startup or something like this. Second question was how much of the data that they hold, and then we can move to the rest of the team, are they opening up for even totally external applications? So all of this open data, their data am I able to just build something totally different out of it?
Yeah, so they do, and we actually did it in ABC Universal too. There's an open API. So if somebody wants to go develop against that and build a better platform or build a better experience, they can. And Comcast gets a lot of bad. They take a lot of flack in the U.S. around customer service and things like that. So more and more they're opening it up and saying, great, well, what do you want to control yourself? What do you want to manage yourself? And they have an open API to do that.
Okay. Right.
Just on the point that Rob was mentioning, so Frog Ideas is a digital solutions company, and we do digital strategy, which includes services as well as products. One of our engineers in India, and we operate out of 4 continents, so one of our engineers in India was really passionate and was a very big patriot. And Indian government is not necessarily a very smart government at the moment because of the scale of the country and the amount of population that we have. He took it upon himself that he wanted to make a smarter government. So he made a software which we call LEAD, which helps governments become smarter. Now, just as an example how powerful that becomes, during the Nepal earthquake, there were tons of Indians who were stuck in Nepal, and there were a lot of people who were tweeting to the Minister of External Affairs saying, I'm stuck at this place, can you help me? Because I can't reach the embassy, I don't have a phone line, and don't know what to do. The Minister of External Affairs individually coordinated rescue efforts on Twitter. And we were able to save about 1,200 lives because of that. It's an incredible statistic because one engineer sitting out of an office in Delhi is able to develop a software which is helping governments become smarter.
So they use the Twitter feed and that software to be able to coordinate
multiple things, but it helps in roads, it helps in health, it helps in every possible thing that a government could involve themselves in, and it creates impact. And that's exactly what a smart enterprise is supposed to do. But it came from a culture of innovation, of being empowered.
Anthony, smart used to, be the IBM thing, and still is, and it doesn't sit anymore on a mainframe somewhere. We are seeing, with Watson, which you have described, the ability of putting it on a cloud. But I know you are also opening it up for the startups somehow. So maybe you can talk about that.
So as you had mentioned, so Watson, the cognitive computing capabilities that I mentioned are delivered from the cloud. Now, one of the interesting things that's happened from a market or an industry perspective with our clients is our traditional constituency are banks, telcos, and governments. So if you take banking, what's happened, and many of our clients have felt this, is that they are under threat from fintech startups that are more agile, that are addressing demand in a more innovative way. So they're thinking, okay, how do we innovate? How do we compete? And so a public example that we can use is Citi. So the CMO for Citi, she came to the conclusion that whilst people need banking services, maybe they don't need banks, right? And you could see that gradually, their business faced the threat of death by 1,000 digital cuts. So what we did is we said, okay, how can we take the startup world, the developer world, take the enterprise world, and bring the two together and create value for essentially the world. And so what we did with Citi, and we've done it with NASA, and we've done it with other organizations as well, is we run these hackathons, right? These global hackathons where we take APIs from the enterprise, we publish and expose them into a platform, and then we bring developers and we incent those developers to innovate and create new apps on that platform using services like Watson as well as the enterprise's own APIs. And so this is how we're starting to work very closely with startups, with developers, with people and organizations that traditionally weren't IBM's core constituency.
Absolutely.
I have another good example there. One of our clients is the MTA, the Metro Transit Authority in New York City, the subway and the bus lines. They've opened up an API and let people build apps that give services. They've got hundreds of apps that people have built. So things like, where to stand on the subway, to get the best exit closest to the stairs, like things like that. And during Sandy, and all of that's on the cloud. And during Sandy, when that infrastructure was down, their data center was in southern Manhattan, those APIs, those apps are still up. It was leveraged in the cloud and very successful.
So I want to jump to the future now and get your prediction. If you had a crystal ball in just a few words, what keeps you awake at night? What do you think is going to happen in the future that's going to disrupt your industry or the industries that are around us? We'll start with you, Afzal.
All right. Well, like I said earlier, we don't think in the next 10 to 15 years we will be moving boxes the way they are moved today. There probably will be a different way of doing it. Maybe we might not even move any boxes. It's quite likely that goods will be produced at the point of consumption, and for a company like us, we need to think of different ways of doing business, and that's something that keeps me up.
So 3D printing, for instance, is going to really affect what we ship?
Is one way that it could happen. There are different scenarios that we see. Shipping lines could be moving things differently. They might be moving over the poles rather than moving the way they do right now. 3D printing is one way things could be different. There are various ways in which things could happen that people would not need the kind of goods that they need today. There could be different ways in which transactions are conducted, and hence the movement of goods would be reduced or could change dramatically.
Anthony, what's IBM hiding?
Sorry?
What is IBM hiding for us?
Nothing. It doesn't keep us awake at night. But it drives a lot of what we're doing is how do we stay in front of the industry? How do we stay in front of a lot of the innovations that are happening in a world where the barriers to entry in terms of technical innovation have been completely lowered. Right now, we're talking about public cloud, but we're rapidly moving to a world of hybrid cloud. Recognizing that enterprises will never move everything to the public cloud, they'll always retain something behind the firewall. So how do we make sure that we address that? And then we start thinking about hybrid applications. Applications where you have components that are running in the cloud, other components running behind the firewall. And then moving forward, and this is many years in the future, we start thinking about hybrid data, where instead of having your own data sources within the company, you will rent or you will buy data from a data cloud provider, and how do you manage the security around that, and how do you make it available in a performant and...
This is the data economy. And do you see it moving beyond B2B to B2C or C2B model as a consumer? Will I be able to actually monetize my own data somehow?
So, we're not a B2C company, we're a B2B company. And so where we depend upon startups is really in bridging our technologies and our platforms and using those to deliver value to the end consumer. So this is an area we need to focus on.
Jatin.
So while IBM
Full stop.
So while IBM focuses a lot on disrupting industries, we focus on disrupting the way certain functions get carried out in a particular industry, and that can be different industries and particular functions there. So for example, hiring or selling, or the way that you're communicating with your.
So you're looking at the soft skills. This is what I noticed. So we have more technology in IBM, but you're looking more at how technology can improve the soft skills.
But definitely, I mean, it's, you know, you could have a 2-people team sitting out of Estonia and they could be doing something which is so cool and you probably haven't thought about it. So definitely puts you up.
So a bigger, more connected world. Rob, last one.
Two things. I think, you know, so one, I'll build on what you talked about, B2C and C2B consumer data. In the media industry, the change is going to be that it's direct to consumer. It's creating content that's very, very personalized, which isn't how that industry operates today. So that's going to be a big disruption. The second is, with actual content distribution, there's a lot of focus on, you know, last whatever 5 years, it's everything's mobile, right? And then it's, you know, now it's over the top. I think it's agnostic. Your content has to be distributed to any platform. So you can't build infrastructure, you can't build, you know, distribution platforms one at a time because it's changing way too quickly.
Are they going to be able to cope with advances like, you know, augmented reality, virtual reality, the HoloLens kind of?
Yeah, and I think the key to that is leveraging platforms like IBM's platform, Amazon, you know, leveraging cloud so that you're not having to manage infrastructure and manage content, right? But then it's being agnostic to what those devices might be.
Thank you. Last questions from the audience? Yeah, very satisfied with what they heard. We have a question way in the back.
Hi, I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on user-generated content, in particular in video at least, and how that could be kind of integrated with other efforts.
User-generated content?
Yes, in video. In Arab.
How is it integrated in? We didn't hear you well.
Oh, sorry.
How is
this is part of an
user-generated
integrated marketing campaign.
Integrated in?
Into an integrated marketing campaign.
Into an integrated marketing campaign.
Yeah, interesting question. Big media has really struggled with user-generated content for moderation issues. You know, if you open it up, people upload, you know, things they shouldn't be uploading. The technology is fine, but actually it's getting better. I think again, I'll use a YouTube example, right? You could argue that's all user-generated, even though some of it's very professional content. And again, I think that's, you know, that's the whole B2C C2B conversation too. You can use their content to drive, you know, your own business models and sell advertising, and then, you know, sell advertising into which.
Yeah, I personally think that nobody really wants to listen to brands. Brands by nature, as soon as somebody starts talking about their own brand, everybody switches off. So brands have to adopt user-generated content in a way that suits their purpose. And the campaigns have to be driven from people's content rather than people being driven through their content. So as a philosophy and as a culture, it is a cultural shift, and either brands have to adopt to it or they have to get ready to have a social debt.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. One of the challenges with user-generated content now, and will become an even more significant challenge in the future, is the sheer quantity of it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you index it? How do you search it? How do you determine what is quality from what is not quality? And so in terms of what has been mentioned around having to leverage user-generated content from a marketing perspective, this is where maybe analytics can play a role in predicting, you know, what is going to be the next viral video or what is going to be the next big thing from a user-generated perspective.
Well, thank you very much, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you managed to extract some useful insights from this panel. I learned a lot. Thank you for being with us. We hope you enjoyed it. For those of you who didn't get asked questions or are microphone shy, you can mingle with the panelists later on during the lunch break. Have a great afternoon and look forward to seeing you next time.